I'm going to read The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Modernized fairy tales, I believe. Let's start. Magnificent set pieces of fastidious sensuality, says Ian McEwan. Okey-doke. The Bloody Chamber. I remember how, that night, I lay awake in the wagon lit in a tender, delicious ecstasy of excitement. My burning cheek pressed against the impeccable linen of the pillow, and the pounding of my heart mimicking that of the great pistons ceaselessly thrusting the train that bore me through the night, away from Paris, away from girlhood, away from the white enclosed quietude of my mother's apartment, into the unguessable country of marriage. And I remember how tenderly, imagined how, at this very moment, my mother would be moving slowly about the narrow bedroom I had left behind forever, folding up and putting away all my little relics, and the tumbled garments I would not need any more, the scores for which there had been no room in my trunks, the concert programs I'd abandoned. She would linger over this torn ribbon and that faded photograph with all the half-joyous, half-sorrowful emotions of a woman on her daughter's wedding day. And in the midst of my bridal triumph, I felt a pang of loss, as if, when he put the gold band on my finger, I had, in some way, ceased to be her child in becoming his wife. "Are you sure?" she said, when they delivered the gigantic box that held the wedding dress he'd bought me, wrapped up in tissue paper and red ribbon, like a Christmas gift of crystallized fruit. "Are you sure you love him?" There was a dress for her, too, black silk, with the dull prismatic sheen of oil on water, finer than anything she'd worn since that adventurous girlhood in Indochina, daughter of a rich tea planter. My eagle-featured, indomitable mother, what other student at the Conservatoire could boast that her mother had outfaced a junk full of Chinese pirates, nursed a village through a visitation of the plague, shot a man-eating tiger with her own hand, and all before she was as old as I? "Are you sure you love him?" "I'm sure I want to marry him," I said, and would say no more. She sighed as if it was with reluctance that she might banish the spectre of poverty from its habitual place at our meagre table. For my mother herself had gladly, scandalously, definitely, defiantly beggared herself for love. And one fine day her gallant soldier never returned from the wars, leaving his wife and child a legacy of tears that never quite dried, a cigar box full of medals, and the antique service revolver that my mother, grown magnificently eccentric in hardship, kept always in her reticule, in case. How I teased her. She was surprised by footpads on her way home from the grocer's shop. Now and then a starburst of light spattered the drawn blinds, as if the railway company had lit up all the stations through which we passed in celebration of the bride. My satin nightdress had just been shaken from its wrappings. It had slipped over my young girl's pointed breasts and shoulders, supple as a garment on heavy water, and now teasingly caressed me, egregious, insinuating, nudging between my thighs as I shifted restlessly in my narrow berth. His kiss with tongue and teeth in it and a rasp of beard, had hinted to me, though with the same exquisite tact as this nightdress he'd given me, of the wedding night, which would be voluptuously deferred until we lay in his great ancestral bed in the sea-girt, pinnacled domain that lay, still beyond the grasp of my imagination, that magic place, the fairy castle whose walls were made of foam, that legendary habitation in which he had been born, to which one day I might bear an heir. Our destination, my destiny. Above the syncopated roar of the train, I could hear his even, steady breathing. Only the communicating door kept me from my husband, and it stood open. If I rose up on my elbow, I could see the dark, leonine shape of his head, and my nostrils caught a whiff of the opulent male scent of leather and spices that always accompanied him, and sometimes, during his courtship, had been the only hint he gave me that he had come into my mother's sitting room, for, though he was a big man, he moved as softly as if all his shoes had soles of velvet, as if his footfall turned the carpet into snow. He had loved to surprise me in my abstracted solitude at the piano. He would tell them not to announce him, then soundlessly open the door and softly creep up behind me with his bouquet of hothouse flowers or his box of marrons glacés, lay his offering upon the keys, and clasp his hands over my eyes as I was lost in a Debussy prelude. But that perfume of spiced leather always betrayed him. After my first shock, I was forced always to mimic surprise, so that he would not be disappointed. He was older than I. He was much older than I. There were streaks of pure silver in his dark mane, but his strange, heavy, almost waxen face was not lined by experience. Rather, experience seemed to have washed it perfectly smooth, like a stone on a beach whose fissures have been eroded by successive tides. And sometimes that face, in stillness when he listened to me playing, with the heavy eyelids folded over eyes that always disturbed me by their absolute absence of light, seemed to me like a mask, as if his real face, the face that truly reflected all the life he had led in the world before he met me, before even I was born, as though that face lay underneath this mask, or else elsewhere, as though he had laid by the face in which he had lived for so long in order to offer my youth a face unsigned by the years. And elsewhere I might see him playing. Elsewhere, but where? In perhaps that castle to which the train now took us, that marvelous castle in which he had been born. Even when he asked me to marry him, and I said yes, still he did not lose that heavy, flashy composure of his. I know it must seem a curious analogy, a man with a flower, but sometimes he seemed to me like a lily. Yes, a lily, possessed of that strange, ominous calm of a sentient vegetable, like one of those cobra-headed funeral lilies, whose white sheaths are curled out of a flesh as thick and tensely yielding to the touch as vellum. When I said that I would marry him, not one muscle in his face stirred, but he let out a long, extinguished sigh. I thought, oh, how he must want me, and it was as though the imponderable weight of his desire was a force I might not withstand, not by virtue of its violence, but because of its very gravity. He had the ring ready, in a leather box lined with crimson velvet, a fire opal Oh, I'm running out of battery. We'll stop here and continue soon.